Previously on the Game On podcast.
So, I mean, that was a famous win for Norwood.
And you as a fellow Norwood High person won't believe this, but bloody Norwood High made us go on a school camp. I missed the grand final.
I've heard this
for
story.
a freaking school camp, Craigie. You reckon? Yeah, you reckon I've
Dirty.
He's dirty, isn't he?
He is.
Yeah, I'm still more dirty on that than any other loss, you know. So yes, yeah.
That's 46 years ago, or 45 years ago now.
He's got an attitude problem, hasn't he? He needs some therapy.
I reckon with a few of our previous guests, we've heard this story 3 times. So maybe this is the therapy. Maybe it's a bit cathartic.
Craigie though was a Norwood High. Palmy, I sort of had to tread a bit carefully there because he didn't get picked in the 78 side and he should have. So I had to tread a little bit more carefully there with Palmy than I would have. So, yes.
Yeah. They were great days. They were fantastic days. It's really good talking about them. So, bring back so many fond memories.
Sportscast SA presents Game On. Game On. South Australians' destination for everything sports. Local, national, and international sports. AFL football, soccer, basketball, golf, baseball, tennis, cricket, and any other sports played in this wide world. And we're going to have a blast doing it. So sit back, relax, and let's do this thing. Welcome to Game On.
Welcome to Game On. My name's Pete, once again joined by Malcolm and Neil Craig. We had to split the interview up into a few 3 sections to be able to fit it all in with our regular episode, and fantastic talking about the grand final, and obviously you missing out was another little bit of fun with Craigie there.
Craigie enjoyed that though, actually. Look, what a privilege to interview Neil Craig for over an hour and a half. Like, he's elite. He's an exceptional man. He's a genius in a lot of ways.
Yep.
And, it's just a privilege that he gave us so much for his time.
Absolutely, and part 2 coming up later in today's episode, so we look forward to that. But let's go around the grounds.
Around the grounds.
All right, once again, we'll talk a little bit of tennis, a little bit of basketball, a little bit of soccer, but we'll kick off with the AFL, mate. First things first, a national AFL reserves competition has been mooted over the last week or so. We did our interview with Craigie a little bit earlier last week, so there are some topics we're sort of playing catch-up on a little bit, but still worth talking about. Some thoughts on that?
Look, well, there's one particular person, since he's no longer coaching in footy at the moment, could probably let it out, but Brett Hand, who ended up coaching Coach Glenelg, and that Brett's played at Norwood, and that. Brett was working for GWS, and they actually got a letter, get prepared for a national reserves competition. Now, that's probably about 10 years ago now.
Right.
And GWS, along with all the other clubs, had started interviewing people to sign them up, and then it didn't happen.
Right.
So it's been in the pipeline for a long time. Anyone thinking this is just a maybe now, it's been in ages. The bizarre part is it's sort of already happened.
Yep.
But it's an Eastern Seaboard competition where the Brisbane and Sydney and GWS are in the reserves comp, and yet not the other AFL side. So it is a bit crazy. Look, I'm still worried about it on an SANFL sidelines in terms of, and ironically, James Fantasia is not one of them I've spoken to, but I've spoken at length to 3 other SANFL CEOs. One of them thinks we would survive without one of them thinks we wouldn't. One of them's in the middle. So it's very interesting there that it's so much. And I've said for ages, we need to get rid of the bullshit, actually have complete honesty. What money do we get from the AFL? From Stadium Management Authority deal, this, and this. In other words, what's the deal going to be if they leave with the Stadium Management Authority? Remembering, don't anyone forget, that the only reason Adelaide and Port Adelaide are around is because the SANFL in the first place. So anyone who thinks, oh, well, they shouldn't get anything anymore if the SANFL clubs aren't in it, that's garbage, because without them there wouldn't be the side. So hopefully that bit would still stay pretty similar. But there needs to be complete transparency. Yep. And at the moment, there's he say, she say, and a lot of Chinese whispers, for the saying. And it's garbage. It should be honesty to know exactly where we stand.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought up the SNFL, which is what I was going to lead you into, but you got there before I had a chance to ask. But yeah, it's very interesting that you've spoken to three people and obviously reading some of the comments online as we do as part of the podcast to sort of gauge the temperature. There's a lot of people that are yay for it, and there's a lot of people that are nay for it. And I think it's going to be a really good opportunity for the SNFL to sit back, I believe, and reevaluate where they could potentially be without Port and the Crows being in it. For me, it's a little bit unfortunate that Port Adelaide have to give up, their place within the SNFL because they have been part of it for 150 odd years. But
they want to as well.
Yes,
and the whole bit where there's been this dart thrown at the Crows for a long time that the Crows don't take finals seriously and all that. And that is spot on. The Crows in 2016 were disgraceful in that final against Sturt, the prelim final. If anyone wants to watch a bizarre game of footy, try and find that, and they did not care. Now, Port Adelaide have always said, no, not us. Hang on. The elimination final this year against Centrals, Lysette was very close to best on ground. He goes off the ground in the last quarter when it's 1 point the difference to keep him in ready for the game the next week, which I actually thought was stupid because he needed some work into him at that stage. He missed so much footy, he actually needed the work. I thought it was actually a crazy decision in general. But Port Adelaide, I said, no, we're here to win the SANFL as well. Well, you didn't care. You didn't care about that. So don't throw darts and then do the same thing.
Absolutely. I think it makes sense, and I think a lot of genuine football people will understand that it does make sense that your top-tier competition has obviously the 18 AFL clubs, 19 with Tasmania coming in. A reserves comp would make sense. Again, a little bit like the AFLW, we've sort of done things a little bit backwards in some respect because obviously before the VFL, the SNFL, the WAFL, all the state leagues had their own independent competition, and then to try and make it national, they've tried to fit it into a round peg into a square hole, so to speak. And
well, the old traditional VFL grand final was the 3 games.
Correct.
It was the 18s, the reserves, and the league game. And a lot of people used to get there were at 9 o'clock. Okay, it's grand final day, so it's a little bit different trying to get in and all that. We know that. But they were there ready for the 18s game.
Yep.
The 18s game generally had 15,000 people there at the start. Now, we're now sort of going back to where we were.
Correct. Yeah. So my next point on that, and you did bring it up just briefly then, was then do we have a national under-18s competition to sort of tie in with a national reserves competition, or does that national under-18s competition become part of the independent state leagues? This is where I'm a little bit at unease with it at the moment, going that if you're going to go a national reserves competition, then generally you should have an under-18s competition or an under-20s competition or something along those lines that might actually help that progression.
Considering, being honest, that's what the AFL care about. That's their gravy train for drafting, and sort of like the model which it's gone more and more now and the SNFL falling away, it means, far less chance to find a Hayes, Digan, Puopolo, Lee Spur side of things. So, and that's a worry. You go and watch an SNFL game now and it's dropped away dramatically from 5 to 10 years ago.
Yep.
And it's getting the competition. I don't think the SNFL clubs help themselves either, though. There's not the money around, and they're demanding the guys to train more and more. Now, Cam Ball, I could Google his age, I think Cam's 24, 25.
Yes.
Has left Norwood. He's going to go play amateur league. Well, because it's so intense.
The regime.
It's just too intense as well. And I think Norwood aren't alone there. I think probably Jade wouldn't be the first coach in anywhere where the more you stroke, the harder you work, and it probably needs to be the other way around.
Yep.
and that's sort of been said as well around the traps by Norwood guys. So,
Well, the other option that, we do tend to look to America for a lot of ideas is that you then start to have clubs aligned with certain AFL clubs within certain, a bit like the old days where, the Crows players used to go back to their clubs or they generally got drafted by X amount of clubs were in the Port Adelaide zone and X amount were in the Crow zone. Maybe we go down the path of almost like the baseball in America, where you do have like a minor league team but then again, I do like the idea of the reserves and under 18 competition, and then you're drafting from that under 18 competition.
As much as I hate to say it, I'm very, very happy to have put on a bet that within 5 to 10 years that SANFL and community football will amalgamate.
Yep.
League footy will become Div 1 of community football.
Right.
You can put plenty on that.
Yeah, fair call. Obviously, with like we talked about a minute ago, the money's not there for some of the SNFL clubs. Some of the training regimes are not always the best for younger people that are still working. But you're right. Certainly, it is something that the SNFL have got to explore, and obviously the local amateur league as well need to explore a little bit more, and that promotion relegation process maybe something that they look at. All right, let's move on to the AFL Adelaide. Just looking at now, they've pretty much will finalise their squad, barring their young talent coming in the draft. What's a pass mark for the Crows in 2024?
I think because they knocked on the door of the 8 this year and were unlucky not to make it. Lost 5 games, I think, by under a goal. Mm-hmm. So I think they have to make the 8 next year, would be the pass mark.
Yep. Not make the 8 and win a game, or just making the 8? I know they'll want to win a game.
Yeah, I think they have to make the 8 and be very competitive in that game. I don't think they can make the 8 and get
blown away.
I think they have to make the 8, hopefully win one, but at least be competitive to make another step.
Yep. I mean, obviously injury is going to play a part. Yeah. I mean, we're forward predicting here on best case scenarios. Obviously, they draft a couple of guns in with some of those earlier draft picks that may have an impact almost instantly, like a Max Michelani did this year. Drafted last year, comes in this year, has a pretty immediate impact. You'd expect Jordan Dawson would take things to another level. The one for me is probably Riley Thilthorpe. I really want to see him take that next step, a bit like what Fogg did last year.
And then Fogarty plateaued again. They're the two.
Yep.
Thilthorpe and Fogarty actually take a progression.
Mm-hmm.
The Crows will make the 8.
Yep.
Now, at the moment, Thilthorpe really is just showing the odd glimpse. Probably more in his first game than he's ever done since.
Yep.
And there was a showdown he was good in as well. But he's just got to do more.
Is that a case of him not being that number one target? And he does have to play second fiddle to Fogg, who had a really good year, and obviously Tex Walker had a fantastic year as well.
I think the other worry is I don't think he actually wants to ruck. Now, that's Adelaide's biggest weakness. If he enjoyed rucking, I got no doubt he would have been first ruck this year.
Yep.
But I don't think he enjoys the physicality side of it. You have to enjoy it. You have to love it to do it.
Obviously.
And I think that's a real worry with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think both him and Fogarty, because again, Fogarty's height's a bit of a nothing height and that side of things. And it's hard to be a leading forward these days when the opposition's defence is flooding and, and all that sort of thing. So they're the two with the big question marks. Look, they need a Dowling, Nankervis to make an impact.
Yep.
Losing Murray is vital in their defence, losing Dode. So whether their defence is going to stick up, defence and ruck are the big key questions for me.
Fair enough. All right, we'll move on to Port Adelaide. Port Adelaide, what do you think their pass mark might be for 2024?
I reckon they've got to make at least a prelim.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe one more, really, for the coach side of things.
Yes.
But again, on injuries, and it's such a ruthless comp. Like Melbourne were bees dick away in both finals, so it is so fine.
Absolutely.
Such a fine line.
We've talked about the Fab 3, 4, 5 that Port Adelaide have got. Obviously, Connor Rozee looking at potentially being captain on a little bit of a pay increase. I'm hearing around the place. Potentially could be there. Jason Horne-Francis, we've talked about previously, had a very, very good first year up at Port Adelaide. I would expect that his progression wouldn't plateau.
And then Butters. So the dynamic threesome in the middle, that's capable of them. They need Todd Marshall to stand up for mine. Georgiadis will come back reasonably early in the year.
Mm-hmm.
But Dixon's still a big question mark and always is on his body.
Yep.
But they need Marshall to go from that kid who shows promise to really impacting the competition.
My big one is probably Ollie Wines.
Massive.
Where do they
play?
Where do they play him?
Yeah,
he's come out obviously in the last few days and sort of said that, I felt like I didn't give my best to the team this year. Almost trying to fit into a slightly different role, but for me, he's probably the one big question mark. From that point of view, obviously them recruiting Radaglia is going to be interesting to see how that works with Aaliyah as well. So for me, I'm a bit like you. The pass mark, I think, for Port Adelaide, the bar is set a little bit higher. Yeah. In saying that, which team do you think's a little bit close to a premiership, Port or the Crows?
I still think Port, but I still think both are. I think Port are more of a chance. Put it that way. That's probably the best way of describing it.
Just where they are at the moment, list profile, who they've recruited.
Yeah.
I somewhat tend to agree. If Adelaide's injuries were a bit like where they were this year and they do unearth a couple of guns that maybe they can take that next step a little bit quicker than we all thought. And really, at the end of the day, if that goal had been allowed against Sydney, then they probably would have played finals. But that's a whole nother ball game. Yeah. All right. And just on the AFL, just the last one, I'm noticing that a lot of players obviously posting on social media that they're taking it upon themselves to start their pre-seasons a little bit earlier and obviously get in the gym and do a little bit of extra work. I know that the fitness and conditioning guys do give them sort of programs that they can go away, but it just seems like they're coming back better and better prepared each year.
It's nothing new. Look, of a previous guest we've had on the show, David Palm, that I did his pre-season Christmas break with him over down at Victor Harbour, and this was, I reckon it was when Bartlett was coach on memory.
Yep.
And it was a 40-odd page dossier. I think I read it more than Palmy did, I will add. But so it's nothing new.
No, absolutely. I'm just making mention that, it's great to see some of these players.
Might
especially
get more publicity now. You get less of like the Darren Jarman turning back up way overweight. Those sort of days are gone, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
And obviously some of the more experienced players or slightly aging players like a Sloan and a Walker, they're trying to get ahead of the game. So I can totally understand it. So, all right, we'll move on to cricket, mate. Australia take down England, which we sort of hoped was going to happen, but it certainly happened in fine style. And then a bit of a narrow escape against Afghanistan with Australia 7 for 91, and then Glenn Maxwell comes to the crease and goes absolutely insane.
As I said to Jake Bushell yesterday, I said, look, that's the most unique innings I've ever seen. I've never seen anything like it. And he actually said, well, consider how much bloody cricket you've watched in your life. And it was remarkable. His body was gone. So he was playing shots I've just never seen anyone play before. Mm-hmm. Like it was a stick man swinging, and he played a reverse ramp off the opening bowler.
I think I know the one you mean, yep.
It was just crazy. And he still just seemed to be hitting every ball in the middle. It was quite incredible to go 7 for 91. The game's over. That's it.
Absolutely.
Geez, that's disappointing. Afghanistan now make it probably. Rah, rah, rah.
Mm-hmm.
And he just kept going. And in the end, Australia actually got him with 3 overs to spare. We didn't get him off the last ball.
I did read somewhere that highest 8th wicket stand by about 60-odd runs. So Glenn Maxwell turning back the clock a little bit on what we like to see in the game, and it was almost like he took it on like a 2020 and just kept slugging and slugging and slugging.
It was just, and the fact he couldn't run to take singles, it was just so weird.
Mm-hmm.
And quite incredibly, Cummings batting at number 9 has played a sheet anchor role.
Yes. What was 12 off 68 or something like that?
Yeah. So it was a really weird game and unique. let's not forget, for all the crap Maxwell's copped over the years, he never played a home test match.
Okay.
He never played a test match in Australia, which I think is a real indictment. There was the big question mark over him. He went and made 100 in India and on fighting to save the game, a slow 100. Everyone thought, he couldn't do that.
Yep.
You know, he's got out playing that stupid reverse sweep. He hasn't got the temperament to play test cricket. But I'm going, he never got given a go. And Doug Walters used to play some crazy shots. And Ian Chappell's summary of Doug was, as long as he wins me one test match out of 5 in the series, he's doing his job.
Yep.
Don't dare say that Glenn Maxwell couldn't have done that.
Absolutely. All right, we move on to a little bit more of the local stuff with the Redbacks against Queensland. South Australia declared 5 for 359. 238 reply was Queensland's first innings, but
we're just about to lose at the moment.
Yeah.
So we had a lead of 130 on the first innings. And ironically, as an experienced South Australian follower, I'm thinking, that Skekedy and Pearson put on 54, I think it was, for the 9th wicket. And I'm thinking, wonder if those runs will end up winning Queensland the game. Mm-hmm. Sure enough, we then collapsed to only make 151 in the second innings.
Yes.
Queensland are currently 4 for 220 and need 53 to win. So very disappointing, predictable South Australia.
But Khawaja obviously 92 there, certainly holding the Queensland innings together.
Yeah, we did have him 2 for 13. Big LBW appeal on Burns when he was still on Norwood. So there's a little bit of luck. But look, Fraser McGurk, we've recruited him from Victoria. The kid's got ability, but he's cricket brain dead. Some of the shots he's played, he got caught on the boundary 5 minutes before lunch to make us 5 for 115 against Tasmania in the first game. Mm-hmm. He's got caught yesterday at deep extra cover.
Yep.
So we're then 5 for 110 when they put on 40 odd to get us back in the game.
Yep.
At that stage, back for another, bit more. We're home.
Yes.
Or in terms of at least drawing the game, and dumb again. And it's just stupid errors. Really frustrating.
Bit more thought.
I will say, look, good to see Henry Hunt made 100 in the first innings, but he made a duck in the second, and he hasn't been pushed his game to the nets consistently. The only batsman at the moment for South Australia who's been consistent is Nathan McSweeney. Mm-hmm. He's had a very good year. And I think around the traps at the moment, if there was a middle order injury in Australia at the moment, McSweeney's the call-up out of all the states. If you actually go through it,
yep,
there's no one banging down the door any other state. So that's promising.
You'd know better than most watching
Shield
cricket, probably a little bit more than what I would
Queensland Clayton hasn't quite done enough. There's been nothing in New South Wales. Mm-hmm. Tasmania is probably nearest to Jordan Silk, who's probably too old, you would have thought. And there's been really no. And WA, nothing else in the Bancroft at the top and Whiteman maybe at the top.
Yep.
But after that, Philippou's fallen away. Turner hasn't done enough. I think McSweeney is the logical middle order player, which probably surprised people if you don't really follow Shield cricket. Mm-hmm. If you're not a moron like me who follows Shield cricket.
I'm not suggesting that at all, mate. Yeah. I know you love your Shield cricket, and I only get to watch it when the opportunity arises. All right, let's move on to the AFLW. Round 10 completed. Port Adelaide sending out one of their absolute legends in Erin Phillips in style. Like we did mention a bit earlier, we recorded our episode a little bit earlier last week before her announcement because of Craigie, and we're trying to fit in with his timetable a little bit. We didn't get a chance to give her the dues that she deserved last week, but we want to give them this week in that she's been a revelation for the AFLW competition.
Probably the best way to describe it is being involved with Norwood, and we worked out that Erin Phillips was worth about $5,000 to $10,000 to Norwood Footy Club, her playing. Mm-hmm. And there was a game she had a fitness test in, and it was my job to find out whether she'd passed it or not. She had.
Yep.
I then was told, right, Malcolm, don't care how, but get it out there on every radio station exactly how. I don't care what name you use, what you send in.
Yep.
Was to get it out there. And that show. And look, Erin also, there was a game I was working. I was actually technically employed by the AFL.
Yes.
So I was still. It was probably about an hour and a half after the game, and there was Erin still signing autographs. Everyone else, every other player was well and truly off the ground and all that. So she has been the biggest ambassador for the game. Not only the best player, but the biggest ambassador as well.
And that sort of leads me into what I was going to sort of suggest next is that I think the AFL do need to name an award for her, and that will come obviously in time. It is a bit new at the moment, and people are sort of saying, they need to give her a award, they need to give her a award. I'd like them to think through it a little bit carefully because
it's ironic you've said that because Nicole Livingston had come out and said those words today, that they are holding back and all that at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that, but I still, and there'll be Victorians will push the Daisy Pearce side of things, but I still think it was Erin at the start. She was the pin-up girl, the basketballer, the son, the daughter of Greg.
Yep.
And let's not forget, Greg's in the Hall of Fame. Greg is one of the, if I'm picking my best ever side, it's out of Greg Phillips and Ross Glendenning for centre half back. Yep. So that's how highly I rate Greg Phillips.
Yep.
Provided Norwood far more troubles than any other player ever has.
Yes.
And that.
Maybe we should try and get him on at some stage. Should be good.
It's not easy, Greg.
no, that's fair enough. But as you said, Erin there, such a great ambassador for the AFLW, and I think that she does need to be recognised in some way. And we congratulate Erin on a fantastic career. And I think she probably could have gone around again, but look, she's not getting any younger. She's trained at the elite level for so many years, not only in the basketball career, but obviously at the football career. And she got to captain her club, really, at the end of the day. I mean, there's a lot of debate about, is she a Crow, is she Port? Look, at the end of the day, she had to play at a team that allowed her to come home, which was Adelaide at the time. But as soon as Port Adelaide were entered into the competition, she was always going to be one player that was going to make that transition.
Well, let's also remember she'd played in 3 flags. What else have you got to achieve?
Yep, absolutely.
It's been 2 wickets in 4 balls at the Gabba, so they're 6 for 219
with about stage. 2 I think I can see on the screen. Port Adelaide defeating the Giants by 58 points, obviously sending Erin off in style, and also the Port Adelaide crowd at Alberton. And Adelaide did what they needed to do against the West Coast Eagles to put themselves in a pretty good position, and it ended up working out very, very well for them. And now they have the minor premiership, which gives them a home final.
And Adelaide rested a few too. Hatchard, Randall, so they rested 6. So that's probably one thing which they couldn't have done a few years ago. There wasn't the depth to do that.
Yep.
So that's encouraging. Yeah. So now minor premiers, 2:35 Saturday afternoon at the home of football versus Brisbane. So yeah. So hopefully a full house at the parade.
I think it's going to be a huge day at the parade. Would have been nice to have it on Friday night. Not 100% sure. Not 100% sure why the AFL didn't schedule it for Friday night. Considering I think here on Saturday night we've got Adelaide United and the Adelaide 36ers playing as well. So sort of Saturday is a huge day, not only for people with their own sports. It's a huge day for football, soccer, and basketball. I'm not sure
if it wasn't written in that there was an automatic that every club had to have at least 6-day break.
Right.
May well have been the thing.
Adelaide playing the Brisbane Lions, as you mentioned, at Norwood Oval. Gold Coast Suns playing Sydney. Interesting to see that Sydney just scraping into the 8 with their last gasp win in the
and again by bizarrely a goal umpiring decision. Like Sydney are going to have awards for goal umpires this year.
Absolutely. Best and fairest could be interesting. Geelong v Essendon down at GMHBA Stadium, and Melbourne v the Kangaroos.
That'd be really good game. I was really impressed with North Melbourne here against Adelaide. So, okay, I'm going to go out on a limb before the final starts.
Yes.
I'm going to tip North Melbourne to beat Adelaide in the final.
Okay. All right. There's your tip, and we might keep that one on replay. We'll see how we go. Obviously, Adelaide, the bogey team is Brisbane.
Yeah.
Melbourne, we've said all the way along that we sort of think that they're going to be the benchmark.
Now, I do want to have one crack at the tribunal last night. Yeah, there were 2 Brisbane players Hessop, keeps the 3 games and had to. It was a diabolical tackle. And yet again, Kim Dillon, dinosaur land on the radio today, thinking there was nothing in it. If you watch it slowly, no, she slammed the head in the ground. For goodness sake, those days have gone, you donkeys. And the other one, blatantly guilty as well. Went past the ball, elbow raised. How that went from deliberate to careless.
Yes.
Crazy. Absolute bullshit. It was a blatant game.
Yep.
I don't care if she's playing. I'm just saying it's wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, especially with the Adelaide player with the bump a few weeks ago that got weeks for a legitimate bump that obviously ended up being a touch high. But, very, very interesting. All right, we'll take a very, very quick break. When we come back, we've got the tennis, the basketball, the soccer, and also Neil Craig Part 2.
You're listening to the Game On Podcast. We'll be right back after this short break.
All right, we'll kick off with tennis. The Billie Jean Cup, Australia goes down 2-1 to Slovenia. Both singles losses, but we come back pretty strongly in the doubles. It does keep Australia in the hunt. They do need to win against Kazakhstan for a chance to make the semi-finals.
Yeah, a little bit disappointing against with Slovenia, but I reckon you've done well to even find that with a lack of publicity. And again, that probably comes back. There's no Ash Barty. If there's an Ash Barty around, that gets promoted.
Yes.
So, a little bit frustrating that,
Little bit of late night TV at the moment, obviously with the cricket being on. I think Channel 9 at one stage had 3 lots of sports going within one night, and one of them happened to be the tennis. So I was flipping between channels, but obviously keeping an eye on the tennis as well. But you're right, the lack of publicity doesn't help the game here in Australia, which seems to be building in the right direction, but a bit more at the local level with some local players. You want more participation to build the base.
Yes.
Also, sticking with tennis, Saudi Arabia are looking to host a new event in January, which threatens the lead-up events to the Australian Open. There's about $500 million on offer.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to compete with that, isn't it?
We did talk a couple of weeks ago about how the ATP Tour and the WATP Tour are trying to get together or maybe formulating some sort of plan so that way we don't get a scenario of Live Golf where countries that do have $500 million on the table can take away from some of the major tournaments. The question will be whether they take away from one of the other tournaments throughout the year, one of the Australian tournaments in the lead up to the Australian Open. Obviously, the Grand Slams are obviously worth the most amount of points. Then you've got the 1,000 events, the 500 events, the 250 events, and so on. They're looking to be in at the 1,000 points events. So they're looking for something major to then lead into something even bigger in the future. So we'll keep a bit of an eye on that. But $500 million on the table is a bit hard to ignore.
Need Connor Rosie might have to sponsor it. Might be the only way out of that.
He might be. Yeah. All right, we'll move on to basketball. Once again, the curse is struck. Every time we get hope, the 36ers unfortunately fall in a little bit of a hole, and that's exactly what they did against the Wildcats.
Yeah, in a game which fluctuated. Had a fair few swings and roundabouts that game. One team and then the other in control.
Down by 20 points at one stage as well, so the gap was just a little bit too far to reach.
Again, always some interesting refereeing decisions over in two headers land as well. So
absolutely, and obviously the Adelaide 36 taking on the Tasmanian Jack Jumpers this weekend.
Yep.
Look, CJ Bruton is obviously hoping for some consistency because it has been a bit up and down right from the start of the season. So good luck to the 36 this weekend. All right, we move on to soccer. The last of the qualifying games, Australia finished off in pretty good style.
Yep.
What's next for the Matildas? They've got a couple of friendlies coming up in December against Canada. They're away.
Yeah.
But the most important part is it looks like the pay deal has somewhat been struck.
It looks like that way, which is that's a good sign. So it was a workmanlike, efficient
campaign.
Week campaign for the Matildas, yeah.
Absolutely. And then to top it off, the pay deal looks like it's going to be finalised, which is very, very good for those Australian players. All right, Adelaide United played a 1-1 draw against Melbourne Victory. Nesta Irakundu poked and prodded by the opposition, and they sort of got the result that they wanted, which was him being completely frustrated.
poor refereeing, I will say that. Poor by the youngster to react, but geez, there were some very average things let go down where yellow cards should have been issued and would have stopped it. So very poorly refereed as well. I will say Adelaide United, Gauchi was absolutely brilliant in goal. He got the point.
Yep.
If you really Google back and watch the highlights, he makes about 3 really world-class saves.
And I think he's in the 3 or 4 games that we've had already this season. He's had to...
Yeah, he's been good.
I know that they've scored some very, very good goals, but he's also kept the score sheet clean, all but the Melbourne victory game, which was a 1-1 draw.
And the battle with Paul Izzo, former Adelaide United keeper down the other end, brother of Toaster, who listens to our show.
Yep.
So that was also interesting, but no, well done there. And look, a good result in the end, and we're still sitting on top at this stage where it looks like it's a bit of a long... And yet again, it's what are we, 4 rounds in, and another coach has bitten the dust. Sydney's coach Corrick has gone, so that's 2 gone already.
All right.
They don't muck around in the old world of...
no, they
soccer.
don't, but they do give opportunities to coaches who have been in the system and then gone out of the system to come back in the system, whereas AFL hasn't quite done that as well as what the soccer has. But we can talk about that one a little bit later. All right, let's take a very, very quick break. When we come back, Past Players, Past Legends with Neil Craig, Part 2.
Liking this podcast? Please like, rate, and subscribe. Past players, past legends, past legends.
Fair enough. And then obviously we alluded before that you got your chance to come back to Norwood and you held that position until 1995. Some memories there?
Yeah. I have very fond memories of that time. I think it was 5 years I was at Norwood. The first 2 or 3 were really tough years because I think that was the same time. I think I started in 91. I think 91, 92. Yeah, 91.
Start of the
and I reckon
Crows
that was the first year of the Crows.
Yep.
And so there was it was an interesting time because there were a lot of players taken from the SANFL clubs, to play for the Crows, just the way it was set up. And then those guys that didn't play for the Crows would come back to your club. And I was a young coach. I was a young, aggressive coach. I was a black and white coach in terms of my thinking.
Yeah.
So there was a fair bit of anxiety created between the Norwood Football Club and the Adelaide Football Club, and then probably most of my doing. So that was a good learning process. And I think when I first went to Norwood as a senior coach, they hadn't been out of the finals for 22 years or something like that. And in my first 2 years, we missed the final. So, with players, going to the Adelaide Football Club and back and forth, we missed the final. So it was a tough period from coaching. And I hadn't had any experience as coach. So in a lot of ways, like I'm flying by the seat of my pants. But once again, to the credit of Wally Miller and the support that he gave me, and the encouragement to keep going and to make some errors, but to be myself, if you like. We eventually sort of regrouped. I think we played in the grand final
in '93 against Woodville West Torrens.
And we got a bit of a touch up in that game.
Yeah, I admit we might have gone to the bar a tad early in that game. Craigie.
Yes.
I've got scars of that one too, so it's okay.
But once again, in terms of an introduction to coaching, I mean, I couldn't have got a better apprenticeship, and an opportunity to do it because I had to learn on the run and had to learn quickly. So I think I finished there in '95 because I think at that time it was still part time the coaching job, and I was at the Sports Institute in Adelaide, the South Australian Sports Institute. And I was tied up with cycling with a guy called Charlie Walsh. And the '96 Olympic Games were happening in Atlanta. And there was some opportunity and pressure to sort of to travel overseas and go to Olympic Games, with my job. So I remember finishing with Norwood, and I reckon I'm 96. I didn't have any footy in '96.
No.
It was pretty much overseas all the time in the Olympic Games.
Describe that experience, Craigie.
Yeah.
Go for it. Describe that experience, the cycling, the Olympics, Charlie, the whole box and dice. Go for it.
The elite of the elite.
Yeah. Well, it's, once again, I've been really lucky. If it hasn't been sort of SANFL or AFL, I've been really lucky through the Sports Institute back in those days, and through, just by chance, Charlie Walsh and Australian cycling, track cycling in particular, to be able to travel overseas and to go to World Championships and to go to Olympic Games, and to be exposed to a guy like Charlie Walsh. Now, Charlie was way before his time, and I talk about being heavily influenced in terms of the way I think football-wise from the Odie family.
Yep.
I'm just as heavily influenced with the way I think about high-performance sport and the demands of high-performance sport and how to prepare for the demands through my time with Charlie Walsh. Like he took Australia when they were the laughing stock in the world in terms of track cycling, and within 4 or 5 years, they were recognised as the number one nation in the world. So I was able to live that change, if you like, and be part of that change. And so, and whilst you tend not to reflect at the time when I finished with all that, and I reflect back on it, to be in an environment where you went from worst to first, if you like, was a great education. And so, once again, my thinking on high performance sport is very much influenced from Charlie, and even now, like, he's sharp in that space, and I love talking to him about that sort of space.
How was it though?
And of course, what you have there is that it's not what you feel really quickly is it's not Norwood versus Port Adelaide at Norwood Oval, which that's big.
Yep.
It's now Australia versus the USA versus Germany versus Russia versus East Germany and so forth. So everything goes up a level. The intensity goes up a level. The competition goes up a level. The quality of talent goes up a level, because it's nation versus nation, and it's not dissimilar now with some of the work I've been doing with rugby, with England rugby and the Wallabies just recently. It's the same sort of on the international stage. It's the stakes just are higher. That's all it is, and the pressure's even greater.
How was it, Craigie, to go from a sport where you're a superstar yourself, involved in footy, growing up with footy your whole life, to go to cycling, to probably learn on the run a bit and all that? How was that sort of philosophy to go from being, yes, listen and learn, of course, but you still were an expert yourself, to being involved in cycling?
Chalk and cheese as far as sports go.
Totally different, and all that side of things.
I guess to answer that, Malcolm, I mean, my professional background, through study at the university, pretty much Flinders University in reality, was sort of for want of a better word, in sports science and in particular the physiology, which is sort of what happens to the body when you train and so forth. Yeah. So I was lucky enough to start at the Sports Institute, and Charlie was the first full-time coach at the Sports Institute. I was the first-time full-time sports scientist, so it made sense for those two people to get together. Yep. So that was just pure luck. But how lucky was I? Yeah. And so I guess what I was able to bring to the sport of cycling was some science and some applied science, and sort of to maybe add some questions about why you would do that, and are there better ways of doing it from a scientific point of view. So whilst it was a different sport to football, I mean, I was bringing a different skill set to that sport. But even now, I've got a great love for cycling. I mean, I still on the bike, and I enjoy riding and watching it on TV. So, but it's really interesting over the journey. You talk about different sports, and they're chalk and cheese, and in a lot of ways they are, but in probably 90% of the ways they're very similar. There's a technical side of every sport, so that is different. But in terms of the stresses, the strains, the planning, the vision, the communication, the relationships, they're all exactly the same no matter what sport you're involved in. And so, and that's why I've been able to basically go from, say, AFL, if you like, into, say, rugby and cycling and those sort of sports, and still hopefully contribute, because it's, apart from the technical side, the issues and the that you face in AFL are exactly the same issues that you face with cycling, rugby, and whatever.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Obviously, being at the Olympic Games for the first time, were there things that you were able to absorb from other countries that you were able to sort of input into your philosophies?
Well, no, probably the quick answer to that, Pete, is no, because you think when you go to Olympic Games that you'd be out and about and looking at other sports and whatever, but it's quite insular. Once you get there, like you're in the village, you've got your program, so you live in the village, you eat in the village, you jump on a bus, you go to the velodrome, in this case cycling. You're competing against nations that you know about anyway, because you in terms of your training, and you're competing throughout the year.
Yep.
And then when you finish, you basically come home.
Right.
So you don't get a lot of chance to see it, even mix with other sports in reality, because you're so busy, doing.
Probably need to be your sport finished over and done with by the first week to really.
Yeah, well, even then the other sports, Malcolm, are so busy that you become a pest if you try and.
Yeah.
So I mean, a lot of that work is done throughout the year. When you're meeting up, with different nations, and of course through your work. When I was at the Sports Institute in Adelaide at SASI, you are exposed to a whole range of different sports and different coaches. So how good's that environment to pick people's brains. And I'm doing some work at the moment through the Australian Institute of Sport, where a lot of it's with head coaches of a range of different sports, and that's a fantastic professional development for myself to be able to talk to the national netball coach, the national hockey roo coach, and it just goes on and on and on. Diving coaches and whole range of different sports, swimming and so forth. So you do get that cross pollination, but not so much when you're there in competition, because you're so busy.
Yeah, of course. Yep, good call.
Makes sense. So after the Olympics, Craigie, you've arrived at the Crows and the fitness side of things there, in obviously a couple of great years. Yeah, no, it was when was that now? Let me just think. So 96 was the Olympics. Yep, 97, 98. Yep.
97, 98, 99 with Malcolm Blight.
Yes.
Okay, so I remember John Reid. I was in Colorado Springs at the time. So it would have been probably June, July, maybe July, August, something like that. And I got a call from John just inquiring about the possibility of doing some work with the Adelaide Football Club after the Olympic Games. Once again, that was on a part-time basis, because at that time, 97, 98, 99, 97, 98 in particular, was sort of a transition phase in terms of going full-time in the AFL.
Yep.
So anyway, that was a great opportunity, because Malcolm Blight obviously had come to the Crows. And so to be able to work with Malcolm and, to see how he operates, and we were lucky enough to have some success in 97, 98 and back-to-back premierships. And then, 99 was a lesser year. So, but once again, a great learning year and experience. To see how a coach like Malcolm would handle that after the success that he'd had, and so he'd come to Adelaide, pretty hardened senior coach, because I think he coached Geelong. North Melbourne at one stage,
and then Geelong,
and of course coached Geelong and to I think at least 2 grand finals, but I'm not exactly sure, and lost both of those. And so he came to Adelaide as a really a highly successful coach, but a hardened coach. So I remember he was one of the things that stood out, that he was absolutely crystal clear on the way he wanted the game played. and he was absolutely crystal clear about the type of player that he wanted in the footy club. And he was like a dog with a bone with both those concepts. But he brought enormous success to the Adelaide Footy Club. So they were great professional development and learning years for me as well.
Did you have to sort of restart that fitness regime with a lot of the players? Because obviously in 97, 98, the Crows were successful on the back of their fitness, really, at the end of the day, that there was a few secret herbs and spices with the training regime through the middle of the year that sort of changed the way that everyone was thinking?
Well, maybe, Pete. But
we sold it pretty well, put it that way.
I'm trying.
As you guys would know, there's a fair bit of smoke and mirrors involved in high performance sport, and in AFL in particular. So I'm not saying that there wasn't any impact at all. I mean, but there's never one reason with any of that about why teams are highly successful or the opposite. Of no success. It's never one reason, and it's no different with the Crows. So, but what I am really strong on is that at the end of the day, what was achieved there was a result, of Malcolm's philosophy and the environment that he created, and that's just the power of the head coach. And so, when you select a head coach, select wisely, because it's such an important position.
And his ability to think outside the square, I think, was probably what set him, what still sets him apart from most people.
Yeah, so he was, but in general, he loved to attack. Probably without speaking for Malcolm, I think he'd say, well, if the opposition kick 25, we'll kick 26.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that brought a lot of joy to people, the way the Adelaide Football Club played. But he did, he had some, which most of your absolute best coaches are a bit different. They think outside the square and they look under any rock to look for something a little bit different to keep guys stimulated and find an edge. Malcolm was no different to that, and so as I said, they were fantastic 3 years at the Adelaide Footy Club.
And then back involved with cycling again with the Sydney Olympics.
Sydney Olympics, yeah.
Then that was the Sydney Olympics. So, that was sort of, I finished in 99 and 2000, once again, overseas in preparing for the Olympics in Sydney. And then
2001 back at the Crows as an assistant under Gary Ayres. Yeah.
Yeah, as you know my career better than I do, Malcolm. So as an assistant coach of Gary Ayres. So that was 2001, 2, 3, and 4. Yeah. I think it was about 8 or 9 games to go.
Yeah.
Gary left.
Yep.
I was the interim coach. And so for the last 8 or 9 games or whatever it was, and I remember the first game at West Lakes. It was I think we played the Melbourne Footy Club and won fairly easily. And so all of a sudden, you're the Messiah again, you're the guru, whatever, right? 2 games later, we played the Brisbane Lions.
Yeah, that was a cliffhanger at the opening bounce. Yeah.
Up at the Gabba. And I think we got beaten by 24 goals.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And I remember arriving back at the club on the Sunday morning, and there's graffiti all over the wall about, Craig this, Craig that, and whatever. Anyway, long story short, once again, how lucky was I that the Adelaide Footy Club had the courage to appoint me as a senior coach, because I hadn't played AFL, and I remember saying to Bill Sanders at the time, look, when he said, what about an interview? I said, well, I'm actually doing my interview on a daily basis. You can come and have a look, really.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to coach any differently. So, but anyway, the only thing I said is there a prerequisite that you've got to have played AFL to get the job? Because if it is, we might as well finish the interview now, because I haven't played AFL and it's not going to happen. Yep. He said, no. And so anyway, they took an enormous gamble on me. And once again, I'm very thankful for Bill Sanders, and then of course Stephen Trigg, and most of my time there was with Rob Chapman and John Reid, who highly supportive of myself. And when I look back on that and compare it to other clubs, once you've been to other clubs after that, how lucky I was to be involved with the Adelaide Footy Club in terms of professionalism, alignment about what you're doing, capacity to have tough conversations with each other, but all supportive, even right to the end. When it was time for me to go, it was done. When I look back on it, it was done on a really professional basis, and I just have huge admiration. And that was some of the best years of my life coaching Adelaide Footy Club, and I just absolutely loved it.
Mate, did I read somewhere that West Coast offered you a position through?
Oh, I don't know when it was. It would have been
early 2000s.
Yeah, probably. I don't know, 2000. I don't
Two,
know when it was.
I reckon it was 1 or 2. Yep,
something like that. Their position had become vacant, and so there was a couple of interviews that I did there, but it just got to a stage where it just didn't work out, so it wasn't. I just felt it wasn't the right job for me at the time, and once again, a bit like the decision of the Footscray Footy Club, I have no regrets. In actual fact, we went on and had some good battles with the West Coast Eagles, so over the time.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely.
As I alluded to earlier on, right at the start, for all the bit we all cross and analyse. As I've got older, I reckon I've become more reflective, probably more honest and not so emotional about it. We all sit, Craig, he failed in finals. Well, geez, Roo gets reported the last minor round game, so he misses the first final against St Kilda, where he only averaged about 45 touches against. And then the next year he gets bloody parvovirus. And we've gone down free kick against Tyson Edwards in the centre square when Simon Goodwood's streaming forward to pass to have a shot to possibly win the game. It is such a fine line for all the bit. Yes, do I think Matt Bowes should have started on the ground after half time in the prelim? Yes, but it is such a fine line.
And obviously
Craigie.
we're talking about 2005 where the minor premiership came in and then the 2 prelims.
It's such a fine line.
Yeah, so, I mean, you're right. But at the end of the day, I guess when I reflect back on that, 2005, we had a prelim final, got beaten over in Perth.
Yep.
And probably not quite good enough. Whereas I thought the prelim final when we played the West Coast in Adelaide, and we were probably 5 goals up at half time. Yeah. I actually thought that was the one that did get away, and we were good enough to beat them, and that was the one game that I thought we did let get away. So anyway, you take all that and it is what it is. And you just do your best at the time. But I guess the overriding point is what you're saying, Malcolm, is that try when you're analysing it all, just leave the emotion, and leave the emotion out of it to a certain extent, and just try and look a bit deeper. And sometimes it's the same result, it's the same assessment. Sometimes it's a bit different. So,
and I think, Craigie, there it's actually credit to you, because I think it's a hell of a lot of us still wonder about that 2006 and B Cousins situation, etc. Leave it at that. But I think, I've spoken about that with you before, and I just credit you that you're probably more balanced than a few of us on that one. So yeah.
So it is what it is, and but the overriding assessment is that. And I still think about the days. They were an absolute joy of part of my footy career, is coaching the Adelaide Footy Club. I absolutely loved it during my time there, and that includes both the start of Malcolm Blight in the conditioning side, the assistant coach with Gary Ayres, and then the 6 or 7 years as the senior coach. A great time of my life. And once again, we talk about which is your club. Like the Adelaide Crows is my club.
Yep.
So Norwood, I reckon the combination of Norwood and Crows is pretty strong.
And I love Craig in this band. We have discussed this one as well. I love it with Craigie where people say the coach hasn't got a plan B. And as Craigie says, you just block them. They've got no idea. Anyone who thinks any coach at the top level hasn't got plan A to Z has no idea and just doesn't get it. That the half forward then pushes up for 5 minutes, drops off, the +1. There's that many subtle changes people don't notice unless you're actually watching and understand. And, the AFL playbook, having read one of those at one stage, and the terms, the blocker, the roamer, and the pusher, and it's terms which 99% of people would have no idea about.
As I said, there was a fair bit of smoke and mirrors involved in high performance sport. And
then you move on to the Melbourne Footy Club.
Yeah, so at the end of my time at Adelaide. So then I went to Melbourne for a couple of years, and I sort of once again got into sort of nomad movement again. So Melbourne for a couple of years, then the Essendon Footy Club for a couple of years, and then Carlton for a couple of years. Melbourne and Essendon were a tough 4 years for me, because I had wrongly assumed, Pete, that all clubs were like the Adelaide Footy Club, and probably thought bigger and better, in the state.
Yeah.
But I soon come to realise really, really quickly that not all clubs are the same, and certainly, the Melbourne Football Club's I think the oldest footy club in the competition.
Yes.
And then the Essendon Footy Club is one of the power big clubs in the AFL, and it just made me realise how lucky I was to be involved with the Adelaide Footy Club and be exposed to their environment and their culture. Because certainly Melbourne and Essendon were tough environments to be in. But I wouldn't change it for the world, because it's really important to have the exposure. Otherwise, I'd be walking around in dream world, thinking that everyone would be is at least as good as Adelaide, if not better. In actual fact, that's a long way from the truth. So to be exposed to that, to see it, as I said, they were tough years, and probably towards my end of my time at Essendon, I'd sort of started to have lost my passion a bit for footy. It was really an uneasy time for me, and I was lucky enough to from Stephen Trigg, I think was the CEO at Carlton at the time.
Yep.
And he made an offer to me to come to Carlton, and that was when Brendan Bolton was first appointed, and that sort of rekindled my passion and my enthusiasm again for the game. So I thank Stephen for that. One, because the way he operates, he creates an environment where it's got some values and it's got some self-worth, and you feel valued in the system. And so that really rekindled my enthusiasm. And once again, very lucky for those 2 years at Carlton, which is also a big club, I might add.
Yeah.
But each of those three clubs, Melbourne, Essendon, and Carlton, all got different styles and philosophies and for want of a better word, cultures about them. But my last 2 years at Carlton with Stephen and Brendan Bolton in particular were really enjoyable. And at the end of, I think, 2017 was when I started to do some work with Eddie Jones with England Rugby, which is pretty topical at the moment with Eddie. But
yeah,
once again, that sort of leads into our conversation that you don't have to be a technical expert to know about the sport to be able to work in the sport. So,
although you did go through the marking, trying to teach them about marking the high ball a bit more, Craigie, at one stage too.
Yeah. Well, it's a reasonably important skill in the game of rugby union, Malcolm. But it's coming out of AFL system, it makes you realise we grow up with it. That's all we do from a young age, and then we practice it, as I said, 3 or 4 times a day when you're at school.
Yeah.
And so it's natural for us, but it's an unnatural movement for guys in rugby. So occasionally you get one or two that have got a real natural way they go about it. If I want, it looks a bit like AFL style. You probably see it more in the NRL in terms of the high ball. But anyway, that was one area of actual hands-on coaching, technical coaching that I got involved with, and a little bit of kicking as well. But it's difficult to change, you know, the skill level of kicking, because based on the time that you've actually got them at international level, we haven't got them for a long time. But anyway, so at the end of Carlton, 2017 was when sort of I had an opportunity to work in another sport at an international level, with a really high level coach in Eddie Jones. And so in terms of my professional development, that's been a great period for a long period of time. And once again, we've seen the highs and the lows. I've been involved in the highs and the lows of that. Like in 2019, Eddie was able to get England to a level where they actually played in the final of the World Cup, which is huge on the international stage.
Yep.
To just recently where, with the Wallabies, probably I think for the first time ever, they didn't make the quarterfinals. So, you get the exposure of the real highs in sport and also the lows, which is, once again, I keep saying are really important, because you've got the comparison, So I don't wish on anyone to be in an environment where you never get exposed to winning. And I don't wish on anyone where you only get exposed to winning, because you don't get the comparison, and you don't get the learnings, and there's learnings in both.
And how was the role then with mentoring Stewie Jew and with the Gold Coast and that?
Yeah. Well, that's sort of that's been an interesting time, and it's that's becoming more of a
role,
a recognised role in a whole range of sports, particularly at international level, with head coaches. Like a big part of my role with Eddie Jones is a mentor, is a listener, is a questioner, is a truth teller. It's a whole range of, it's just another support. And having done the job myself, Malcolm and Peter, and seeing it in other environments and other coaches utilising people in those positions, there is no doubt in my mind whatsoever, none whatsoever, that if I had time again as an AFL coach, senior head coach, I would have someone in that role with me.
And once again, we thank Craigie for his interview. We've already talked previously at the start of the show about his unbelievable career, and part 3 coming up obviously next week. And once again, we thank Neil Craig.
Thanks, Craigie.
Happy days.
All right, this week we wish a happy birthday to Harrison Petty, the Melbourne Football Club, a defender/forward, drafted in 2017 via Ross Trevor and Norwood. Yep. He was drafted to the Melbourne Football Club with their 3rd selection and 37th overall in the 2017 draft. He's made his debut in the 2-point loss to St Kilda at the Melbourne Cricket Ground, or the MCG, in round 15, 2018. Topical because Adelaide were obviously chasing him this year in the trade period.
It's also interesting that Hawthorn were really interested in him. And so when a club decides they're really interested, it goes up the scale. So I think it's a game at Norwood, and Paul Whaley is just finishing up at Hawthorn, actually. He's retired. Wales said, Robert, why in the hell is Petty playing reserves? I said, maybe he'd be in my league side, Wales, and that. Admittedly, he was a kid and he hadn't played, and all that, but you could just see already.
Yep.
Hawthorn had a guy on a stopwatch because he was playing the +1 role. They were measuring where he was going from contest to contest in terms of his reading of the put and all that.
Right.
So let's just say there may have been a person head down to the Norwood bench and say, get a message out, Harrison, don't dare just be lazy. Actually really work, try and read it, work your butt off, because there's clubs here watching you for that particular reason.
Right, so, there you go. Well, I'm glad I put him on the run sheet, and we wish him a happy birthday for this week. I think he'll be back in Adelaide next year, but we'll see how that plays out.
Wait and see.
Absolutely. All right, we move on to tennis. 2003, Kim Clijsters of Belgium becomes the first female player to earn $4 million in a season when she overwhelms Emily Mauresmo 6-2-6 love in the WTA Championship.
Of course, she was Aussie Kim there for a while
she
she was going out with Leighton. So there was a big interest in Kim Clijsters back then. So, yeah.
And $4 million in a season's not nothing to sneeze at, but these days, obviously, prize money is a little bit higher, and back in 2003, that was a pretty fair effort. All right, we move on to cricket. So I knew you'd like this one, mate. 1985, Sir Richard Hadley takes 15 for 123 in a cricket match, New Zealand versus Australia in Brisbane.
Interesting individual, Richard. He did win player of the series, whatever, and all that. Won a car. Now it was a traditional, generally, that the car would get pulled. That was the agreement amongst the players. It'd be sold and 30 grand to get split 10 ways, or whatever. Let's just say that was never going to happen when Richard Hadley won anything. And he let's just say that he was. Oh, look. Fantastic bowler.
Yep.
And everyone in that was never a question about him as a player.
Yes.
But interesting individual.
Yep.
And we'll move on to our next point.
That's the world we live in. There are interesting individuals everywhere, so we'll leave it at that. All right, 2022. Rugby. New Zealand Black Ferns win the Women's World Cup Championship, defeating England 34-31 at Eden Park in front of a capacity crowd.
Yeah. Fair, it was a big crowd, wasn't it? So, great game, and
once again,
result.
women's sport coming to the fore. Only obviously a year ago, we're starting to see stadiums become packed out. Hard tickets to get, the hottest tickets in town. And I believe that at Eden Park in 2022, it would have been a hot ticket for New Zealand supporters, and obviously getting the win was a bonus as well. And just to finish off, 1995 car racing, German Benetton driver Michael Schumacher crashes in the season-ending Australian Grand Prix in Adelaide to claim his second straight F1 championship, 33 point from Damon Hill.
Yeah, it's interesting with the car drivers in Adelaide and what's ended up happening and things. It's a bit of synergy with a few in that way. So, yeah.
Such a great track, such a great experience.
Yeah.
It would be great to have it come back, but we all know that that's probably not going to be the case. If the Formula Ones do come back, that'll probably end up at the Bend Motorsport, but that's a topic for a completely different day. All right, let's scoot into the extra time big finish.
Extra time, big finish.
All right, we'll kick it off with baseball, mate. What do I know about baseball? Absolutely nothing, because last week I sort of thought the Diamondbacks were going to be the ones to take it out, and then Texas went bang, and it was all over.
You didn't give Texas no chance. Let's not be, you said, look, I favour Arizona, but, it wasn't to that extent.
Obviously, Texas winning the World Series, I believe first time in their franchise history. We have talked about it previously that some of these unknown teams or teams that, not quite taking the extra step, have taken the extra step this time around and paid off for them in spades. Great to see new teams competing, obviously, for that ultimate prize. All right, we move on to horse racing. Yep. We obviously know the race that stops the nation.
Yep.
The Melbourne Cup, always a bit of a highlight and a bucket list for many, but the Melbourne Cup this year has been won without a fight. And not literally without a fight.
Correct.
The horse named without a fight.
Well played, I'll give you that. Jockey goes back-to-back, knocked back the ride on last year's winner and picked out without a fight, so a good decision there.
I know I actually had a few dollars, which I do or have done for many, many years, starting with my grandfather used to put on a small little wager for me, and when it came to the Melbourne Cup, who do you think? And I've continued, keeping that tradition alive, and I ended up picking the winner as well, so... Yay for me, a couple extra dollars in the bank is always handy as well.
Well played.
All right, we'll move on to the SNFL. We'll start off with Norwood. Norwood showing some recruits this year, a little bit earlier than what they have done in the last couple of years. Good to see that they have announced that Billy Cootie, Ben Simpson, Mitch O'Neill have made their way to the parade.
And today, Jeeve Cooper from Murray Bush Rangers as well. So, look, we have to. There's no doubt about that. And let's not forget, not one of the Norwood sides made finals last year. So there was a real lack of depth as well.
Yep.
Look, Matty Nunn was always going to end up back at Payneham.
Yes.
I think there, again, the demands of league footy, I think enjoyment-wise and mental health-wise is a big part while he's back at Payneham now.
Yep.
Lockie Pascoe's at Golden Grove, but also a top-up player for Port Adelaide. It's an interesting decision by Lockie.
Right.
Campbell, I'm pretty sure, is Ross Trevor on memory, and I'm not sure if Josh Richards, because I think there'd be a bit of chasing from a few clubs. I haven't heard exactly what Josh is up to yet.
Obviously, Norwood thanking them for their service.
Yeah.
Obviously, a bit of a tough year last year across all the grades, especially in the league. But some new recruits, bit of fresh energy in the place. Hard to pick. We're not going to talk about it now.
No, but it's disappointing. There's 3 premiership players who aren't that old.
Yep.
From 2022 leaving. So I think it's not only Norwood, but clubs have. Cameron Craig's left North Adelaide to go again. I do think SANFL clubs have to be smarter.
Absolutely. All right, we'll finish off today like we have been in the last few episodes. The good, the bad, the ugly for the week. We'll start off with you're good.
Glenn Maxwell in capital letters. Amazing, incredible, ridiculous.
Yep.
Strike me, Pete, KG, unbelievable.
Absolutely. You're bad?
I'm going to go with the Redbacks again. 130 odd ahead in the first innings, and it looks like we're going to go down in Queensland. Bloody disappointing that to be bowled out for 150. Now, if we made 220 in the second innings,
yes,
that would have been enough. But yet again, just dumb cricket.
Fair call. And I'm assuming that would be your ugly as well.
Oh.
All right, my good for the week is probably the Texas Rangers winning their first franchise World Series. As I said, what do I know about baseball? I know a bit, but no, it's all good. Congratulations to them. My bad for the week is probably the treatment of Irakundu in the soccer. I think that,
I agree with that.
That, being a younger player and I know he's got to get used to the opposition trying to get under his skin a little bit. I think also there needs to be some responsibility taken from all parties involved that, he still is only 17 or 18 years of age.
I'm not worried about that side of it. I'm saying out of that, Melbourne just pushed the button as far as, right, shit, we've got away with that. We're going to keep going and pushed it more and more. Comes back to the referee.
Yep.
Really poor referee.
Absolutely. And my ugly for the week is probably the tackle on the Melbourne player, Brisbane player on the.
Yep, agreed.
Was probably my ugly, considering we have talked about it on previous episodes. Players need to understand that we're in an ever-changing world where these things need to be adhered to, or that mitigation of liability needs to be thought of. And I know it is a spur of the moment type thing, but there's enough education out there to say that it just needs to stop.
How Kim Dillon, listening to me on the radio drive today when I was out driving around, dropping things off, has still got his head buried firmly in the sand. I felt like punching the radio when I was driving, for goodness sake. Yep.
I'll let you do that.
Yes.
My hands are probably a little more valuable at the moment, but
you might get a message after that.
Nah, fair call. Once again, it's been a fantastic episode. We thank Neil Craig for his time over these part series.
Yep.
So we thank Craigie for his time in providing to our episode. Huge week in SA Sport. We promise to do better next time, and we've got hopefully some exciting news to announce over the next couple of weeks as well that we've been working on in the background. So as per usual, we promise to do better. We'll see you next week.
See you guys. Thanks, mate.
In this crazy world we live in, we all need the distraction. Enjoying the show? Like, rate, and subscribe. Hook up and connect with us on social media at Sportscast SA. We'll see you next time on Game On.